Old Ben Kenobi tells Luke Skywalker that the Force is an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. Now that's a terrible Alec Guinness impersonation, but I appreciate you joining us. I'm Jay, and this is The Spirituality of Star Wars, a podcast serial from the Story Geeks produced by the Reclamation Society. What is the Force? Who are the Jedi and the Sith? And what in the world is the Journal of the Whills? We are diving deeper into these concepts while also comparing and contrasting them to the spiritual perspectives we find in our own galaxy. We'll dive deep into Star Wars, but we also need your personal perspectives. Let's make this a conversation. I'll share my own spiritual perspectives, but I would like to hear your spiritual perspectives as well. Leave us a comment on YouTube or Facebook, or shoot us an email at thestorygeeks@gmail.com. We'll even read them on a future episode. Today's topic: what is the Force and what similarities and differences exist between the Force and our own spirituality? Let's break down old Ben Kenobi's basic description of the Force. An energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. The most notable point in that explanation: the Force isn't a god. An overwhelming majority of the world's population believes in a deity of some kind, but George Lucas avoids that altogether, and it's sort of genius. Energy is a fascinating term because it's equal parts mystic and ethereal, and yet also scientific and rational. We use the term energy to describe electricity and fuel and even calories, but we also use it to describe ghosts or how we feel when we're excited or nervous. And we even give energy positive and negative attributes. Why is it genius for George Lucas to call the Force energy? Because the term is ubiquitous. It's relatable to just about everybody. It leaves room for spirituality and science. If you're a person of faith, you can buy into it. If you're an atheist or agnostic, it's highly likely that you're okay with it too. Let's pause here to reflect. What do you think about George Lucas using the term energy field to describe the Force? And how does the term energy fit into your own spiritual perspective? The next part of Obi-Wan's explanation is probably the most controversial. He says that the Force is an energy field created by all living things. Most major world religions have a creation narrative wherein God creates all living things. The opening line of the Bible, for example, is, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." I believe that refers to God creating the universe itself in its totality, not just the earth or the life on earth, the entire universe. Which brings up another key distinction in spiritual perspectives. If living things create the Force is part of the fabric of the universe. But does it exist outside the known universe? I won't dive much deeper into the concept of the living force versus the cosmic force, but even if we did go there, there's not much evidence of the Force existing outside the boundaries of our universe. Why is that a distinction? If you believe, like I do, that God created the universe, that means that He exists both within and external to our known universe. The Force, however, exists only within the universe. That's just more evidence that the Force is not intended to be a deity. But what about you? Do you believe in God? If so, is He, she, or it bigger than the known universe or constrained to it? Or do you think I'm wrong and that the Force is supposed to be seen as a deity? I would love to hear your thoughts. Old Ben Kenobi goes on to say that the Force surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. And we see evidence of that in the films. Force-sensitive people like Rey, Luke, Vader, Qui-Gon, Yoda, Obi-Wan, all the Force-sensitive people use the Force to move objects through space. They let the Force flow through them as well, even meditating in the Force. And we have examples of different characters being bound together, both through their destinies and their connections. And here's where many people, maybe even you, find distinct similarities between the Force and their own spiritual perspectives. Do you feel like you were made to pursue something specific, maybe even called to it? Have you ever felt tied to other people? Some of you are probably rolling your eyes, but others may be nodding their heads. I love the description of the Force surrounding us, penetrating us, and binding the galaxy together, because as a Christ follower, I also believe God does those things. Here's a story from the Bible that I believe showcases that. It's a little long, but stick with me here. In the small Samaritan town known as Sychar, Jesus and his entourage stopped to rest at the historic well that Jacob gave his son Joseph. It was about noon when Jesus found a spot to sit close to the well while the disciples ventured off to find provisions. From his vantage, he watched as a Samaritan woman approached to draw some water. Unexpectedly, he spoke to her. Jesus asked, "Would you draw water and give me a drink?" The woman responded, "I cannot believe that you, a Jew, would associate with me, a Samaritan woman, much less ask me to give you a drink." Jews, you see, have no dealings with Samaritans. And as a complete side note, at this time, a man never approaches a woman like this in public. Jesus is breaking acceptable social barriers with this confrontation. Jesus said, "You don't know the gift of God or who is asking you for a drink of this water from Jacob's well. Because if you did, you would have asked him for something greater, and he would have given you the living water." She responded, "Sir, you sit by this deep well, a thirsty man without a bucket in sight. Where does this living water come from? Are you claiming superiority to the father Jacob, who labored long and hard to dig and maintain this well so that he could share clean water with his sons, grandchildren, and cattle?" Jesus said, "Drink this water and your thirst will be quenched only for a moment. You must return to this well again and again. I offer water that will become a wellspring within you that gives life throughout eternity. You will never be thirsty again." The woman replied, "Please, sir, give me some of this water so I'll never be thirsty and never again have to make the trip to this well." Jesus said, "Then bring your husband to me." The woman said, "I do not have a husband," to which Jesus responded, "Technically you are telling the truth, but you have had 5 husbands and are currently living with a man you are not married to." The woman responded, "Sir, it is obvious to me that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped here on this mountain, but your people say that Jerusalem is the place for all to worship. Which is it?" Jesus told her, "Woman, I tell you that neither is so. Believe this, a new day is coming. In fact, it's already here, when the importance will not be placed on the time and place of worship, but on the truthful hearts of worshipers. You worship what you do not know, while we worship what we do know. For God's salvation is coming through the Jews. The Father is spirit, and he is seeking followers whose worship is sourced in truth and deeply spiritual as well. Regardless of whether you are in Jerusalem or on this mountain, if you do not seek the Father, then you do not worship." The woman said, "These mysteries will be made clear by he who is promised, the Anointed One." Jesus replied, "The Anointed One is speaking to you. I am the one you have been looking for." The disciples returned to him and gathered around him in amazement that he would openly break their customs by speaking to this woman. But none of them would ask him what he was looking for or why he was speaking with her. The woman went back to the town, leaving her water pot behind. She stopped men and women on the streets and told them about what had happened. She would tell them, "I met a stranger who knew everything about me. Come and see for yourselves. Can he be the Anointed One?" A crowd came out of the city and approached Jesus. Now you may be thinking, what in the world does that story have to relate to this topic? So I relate it in 2 ways. First, it shows us that God surrounds us. Jesus had never met this woman before, but he knew that she had had 5 husbands and that her current boyfriend wasn't really her husband. How would he know that unless he was omnipresent? He surrounds us. Secondly, he didn't only know about her behaviors, he also promised to be a fountain of life for her, and he knew that she would be responsive to his message. He knew her heart and her feelings. I think in those 2 ways we can see that God surrounds us and he penetrates us. But what about binding us together? Well, another biblical passage declares outright that God holds everything together. Literally from Colossians, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. That's referring to God. Those are just 2 examples amongst many more. In fact, for those of you who know the Bible, you may be thinking of other, maybe even better examples. For me, Obi-Wan's explanation of the Force sounds incredibly familiar. I understand it because my own spiritual perspective is tied to some of those same principles. I would say the same things about God that Obi-Wan is saying here about the Force. I'm guessing that some of your own spiritual perspective shares at least some similarities as well. Okay, let's do a quick recap. The Force is an energy field created by all living things, distinctly not a deity. It does surround us, penetrate us, and it binds the galaxy together, as some might claim God does, like myself. The Force is part of the fabric of the universe. In my belief system, God is as well, but God created the universe, which means that God is both within the universe and greater than the universe itself. And because of these key points defined by George Lucas in A New Hope, the Force is nearly ubiquitous in its relatability, which is probably why so many across the globe love Star Wars. That does it for today's episode, but the discussion isn't over. Now it's your turn. What do you think about old Ben Kenobi's definition of the Force? What's your own spiritual perspective? Let us know. Leave us a comment or send us an email at thestorygeeks@gmail.com. We'll even read some of those comments and those emails on future episodes. Speaking of which, in our next episode, we'll be discussing our feelings and how they relate to the Force. And also, how do our own feelings relate to our unique spiritual perspectives? One really important side note, the next episode will only be available to subscribers. Half the episodes in this series will be released to the public, but the other half will be available only through Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a platform that allows us to release exclusive content and unique benefits to the Story Geeks subscribers. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, please consider supporting. We would love to have your support. You'll get access to all our exclusive content and some other super cool perks as well. The link to Patreon is in the show notes. Thanks for watching and listening. Please keep in touch. Look for the Story Geeks on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And as we say, question everything and always seek the truth.